Over the holidays, we got yet another edition of the Dum 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 Twitter files, and this one delves into the ways that the government worked with the company to suppress information about COVID.
Yeah, this one came as a real shock to me and Hannah, literally not at all. But so the latest round of the Twitter files, which Elon Musk has been releasing to journalists, he released to somebody named David Zweig. Sorry for the last name. I hadn't heard of him, but he seems to be kind of an independent-minded journalist. He works for Barry Weiss at the Free Press. Um, anyway, this version of the Twitter thread, he reports that the United States government pressured Twitter and other social media platforms to elevate certain content and suppress other content about COVID-19. And what was really interesting about this, Hannah, is that he covers it happening under both the Trump administration and the Biden administration. So even Trump's administration was doing this. He says that at the onset of the pandemic, the Trump administration was really concerned about panic buys and shortages, and they came looking to the tech companies to combat misinformation about runs on grocery stores. But there literally were runs on grocery stores. And so they were trying to get them to tamp down on coverage of true things that could stoke panic. And they were actually requesting that they suppress information about this. And that's under a Republican administration. To me, wow, that's a big red flag.
Yeah, and honestly, not shocking either, because was there ever a bigger blowhard than Trump? He wanted to run around his entire presidency whining about censorship, whining about big tech, and then at the same time, he was leading people in this false goose chase against Section 230, which is an excellent free speech law, and failing to actually go after his own agencies who were doing this kind of crud. I cannot with the whole situation. It is infuriating to me, and it should surprise nobody that both Republicans and Democrats were in on this. We've seen across states, Republicans are also passing really bad content moderation bills against social media companies. They're both guilty on both sides, and I'm really just fed up with it. I think it is completely antithetical to everything that our country is supposed to stand for, and I think that people should be more upset than they are. Instead, we really only see people get upset when it's against their camp, right? Like the right was really upset when it was censoring leftists, and then the left is like not caring at all as long as it's going after the right. And it's really infuriating to me.
Yeah, and I will say it got much more pointed and much more direct when the Biden administration took over. So David Zweig reports that when the Biden admin took over, one of their first meeting requests with Twitter executives was on COVID, and they were specifically pressuring Twitter to delete individual people's accounts, anti-vaxxer accounts, including Alex Berenson, who, if folks don't know, he's a former New York Times reporter who's now, I think, he's super anti-vax. He's been one of the COVID truthers all along. I personally think he's a kind of a crank, and he's like the type that will suggest with no evidence that a vaccinated person had a heart attack. Oh, it must be, the vaccine or something without any evidence of a connection. He'll just insinuate stuff. So I do view his work very skeptically, but that doesn't mean he should have been censored or that the White House should be pressuring Twitter to specifically shut down one information per source's account that they don't like, that contradicts what they're saying. That to me, I mean, wow, he had a lawsuit against Twitter and actually got a settlement out of it. So maybe that's
Wow.
why.
I mean, I think this is a really true statement. Martin Kulldorff, who's an epidemiologist on Twitter, he said, in a pandemic, censorship kills. And that's 100% accurate. This is not a small matter. This is nothing to do with science. Science is all about questioning and continuing to question and examine facts and examine all angles. This was a complete totalitarian response to a pandemic, and it got people killed. That is the long and short of it.
I mean, it's hilarious that you just mentioned Martin Kulldorff, because guess who else was a target of this? So this was not, I don't think, related to the government at all. This was just Twitter's internal debate. Martin Kulldorff, who is literally a Harvard epidemiologist. He has the credentials to speak on this like nobody else. He had put out a tweet that says, thinking everyone must be vaccinated is as scientifically flawed as thinking that nobody should. COVID vaccines are important for older, high-risk people and their caretakers. Those with prior natural infection do not need it, nor children. That is an opinion from an expert. Yet, so this version of the Twitter files released that the moderators intended to take action and claimed that this violated the COVID-19 misinformation policy. They then went on to flag it with a fact check and prevent it from being shared, liked, or retweeted. And I'm like, wow, so literally a Harvard expert is saying his opinion. You can't say it's factually untrue. It's his medical opinion about the necessity of something. And they are saying, well, actually, Dr. Fauci says something different, so we have to delete this. Like, these people have really don't understand why open debate is important. And, like, that's the foundation of science.
I don't think it's they don't understand it. I think it's that they've lost the argument. And I think that censorship is the last resort of people who have lost the argument, who really can't stand on their own merits. And that was the case throughout COVID because they had nothing to back it other than one crazy nut job, Fauci, running around claiming that he knew everything and this was true. And everybody saying, you know, it was a cult. It was a cult-like response. I've never seen anything like it. Yes. Like, I mean, to this day, you have people that like hero worship him and think everything he says is Bible. And it's unfathomable to me that the masses that fell in line for this and that continue to not look at anything outside their echo chamber continue to think that a lot of this was accurate, that he was doing a great job, that these things were necessary, that these things, and that even the other side was getting people killed, right? They called anybody who pushed back on the official narrative grandma killers and said, you just don't care about the elderly or the disabled, and you just are selfish. And it's like, no, we were actually looking at the real data and information, and you weren't. And the whole thing, it's I don't know. It's scary. It's really scary to me, I think, is what it really comes down to, because if they're going to do this for a pandemic, they're going to do it for any number of other things. And we're in the age of information. You know, you like to think that that would mean people have more tools at their disposal, can get things right more of the time. But I think due to tribalism, due to the echo chambers that we're in, due to the algorithms we're in, and due to these policy choices that our government is making and pressuring private companies to make, that's really not the case. You're only getting select information. It often has a lot of indoctrination and bias in it. And people need to just really learn to question everything, you know, really start to question everything you think, question everything you're told, look at other sides, really try to understand your opponent's argument against things. I think that's always so important. Not only if you want to persuade people to think differently, you need to really understand why they believe what they believe, but also because in doing that, you can often find out that you're wrong, right? You can often find out there's things they know that you don't. And that's true for no matter where you are on the political spectrum.
You know, I've thought that sometimes if I ever want to quit journalism or media or whatever, I'd like to become like a high school civics teacher or economics teacher, like social science. And one of the things I think I would do is have all my students prepare like a debate presentation, like pick an issue, prepare a 5-minute argument speech on like why you think your side of the issue is correct. Then on the day of, when they show up, make them argue the opposite side that they didn't prepare for. And if they can't, then maybe not fail it, but give them, or if they do not a great job, give them not a great grade, because clearly they didn't prepare to argue their case if they can't fully articulate the opposite side's view. I think I could actually make a very emotionally compelling argument in favor of a $25 minimum wage, right? Because I've engaged so much of this content in favor of it. But if you can't, then maybe I could even make an economic argument, though I think it wouldn't actually be true, for $15 minimum wage, for example. And I think if you can't, you probably haven't been thinking critically enough about these issues.